Good evening. I'd like to welcome you. Thank you for joining us. I am Mary Beth Farkas. I'm the 2023 PRSA Detroit President, and it's so exciting to have you join us this evening. Admittedly, this is going to be tremendous insight that we're all going to get as it relates to AI and ethics and public relations, so stay tuned for a phenomenal program this evening. I'd like just to simply take a moment to thank Wayne State University. Special thank you to Hassan Elahi, who is the Dean of Art and Art History, College of Fine, Performing, and Communication Arts. If it were not for him to be behind this program, we would not be here this evening. So we owe gratitude to him for this program today. Thank you so much. I'd also like to welcome Associate Dean Kelly Jahng, and I may or may not pronounce the name correctly, forgive me, Pradeep Sapore, who is the chair of the Department of Communication. Thank you for joining us today. If you'd like to stand up if you're here. Thank you. I'd like to remind everyone that no food or beverages are allowed in the space. As you can imagine, we want to be respectful of this beautiful performing arts center. I'd like to give everyone a heads up in terms of our next program. Our annual meeting is going to take place on Tuesday, November 14th at the Great Lakes Culinary Center in Southfield. So stay tuned for more information as far as that goes. It's my honor this evening to introduce Shelley Nager. A lot of people in this room know Shelley very well. Shelley is the Associate Professor of Teaching, Director, Undergraduate Public Relations Program, and she's also a PRSA Faculty Advisor here at Wayne State University. And I'd also like to say that she is a member of our PRSA Detroit Ethics Committee. I'd like to tell everyone that she was amazing to be able to help bring this program together. I'd also like to thank everyone on our ethics committee, and admittedly, it takes a village to bring this program together. There are a lot of people behind the scenes that make this come together. So an applause to everybody for coming together to make this program happen. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mary Beth, and thank you to our fearless leader over here who kept all of us in line and made all of this happen as well. So it is indeed heartwarming, as has already been mentioned, to see so many professionals and students gathered together in what I like to think of as a very supportive environment. We are going to learn tonight about, well, what's new, I guess, something that we all need to learn about. I especially want to recognize the professionals in the room who actively support our students. You support them through mentoring, through providing special professional development opportunities like today, through providing internships, and ultimately by hiring them. And then they come back as alumni, so we like that. So on behalf of the students and the faculty here, we thank you. They hear the students in so many ways count on you, the professionals. Not just on us, the professors, but you, the professionals, okay? And of course, our own Ray Day here, down over here, Ray, has set the bar here. He graduated with a degree in mass communications from our very own Wayne State University. Most people know Ray from his time in Ford Communications, where he spent 28 years, including 10 years as Chief Communications Officer during the dramatic company's turnaround. And one of his biggest passions, which benefits us, is what he calls passing the baton to the next generation, including serving as a student mentor and a guest lecturer here at Wayne State, at Columbia University, and at the University of Florida. He is a member of our College Board of Visitors and recently was nominated by PRSA National as its 2025 chair of the Board of Directors. That's a high position. And it really benefits us to have one of us there. So thank you. Okay. Ray currently currently is the vice chair of Stagwell, a group of 72 global agencies that provide PR, marketing, advertising, research, and digital support to the world's leading companies. Most importantly, however, Ray is one of us. He is ours. So thank you, Ray, for so much and for envisioning this and making this awesome event happen. Ray.
Thank you, Shelley, and it's good to see that you haven't changed. It's good to have a PR person like Shelley champion you and introducing you, so thank you very much. It's good to be back here at Wayne State. We are going to dig into the program. You've all come to hear about AI. And the reason we picked AI is for PRSA, September is Ethics Month. And throughout the country, when people are talking about ethics, or throughout the world, when they've been talking in 2023, they've been talking about AI, and the two terms come together. And I'm going to dig into our panelists, and I'm going to moderate and not say a lot, but I want to start out with a story. One of our journalists is ill and couldn't join us today, so we're fortunate to have two other news media members join us. But as I was looking to see who else was available in the Detroit area from the news media crowd, to join us, I was having a lot of conversations. And I reached out to a very senior member of one of our Detroit media outlets, who will be nameless. And this person is at the top, on the masthead, so very significant and opinion former. And I said, we're going to talk about AI, and we'd love to have you part of our panel. And this person texted me back and said, let me be clear with you. I don't like AI. I wish it would go away, and you don't want me on your panel. I said, fair enough, and we moved on. But I wish it would go away. That's not the first person that I think any of us who have been dealing with AI have heard make that comment. And one of the rules of the road as we picked this panel today was we wanted to be provocative. We want diverse views. We'd like this to get a little respectfully messy and tense, including your questions in the audience. But one of the things we all agree on is AI is not going to go away. It is here to stay. What we do with it is what we're going to talk about tonight. Everything we say is on the record, and if you do post or talk about this in any way, the PRSA Detroit chapter asks that you just add hashtag PRSA Detroit, one word. So I am going to start us off and have each of our panelists introduce themselves. I'll start with Steve since he has the microphone. Maybe tell us who you are, your name, your affiliation, and then more importantly, how has AI touched you, your job, your life? And be brief, this is the intro part, and we'll dig into the meaty questions. But we'll start with Steve.
Thanks, Ray, and just an amazing privilege to be on the panel with this group of people. And my name is Steve Mnich. I lead AI and strategic partner communications for a company called Salesforce. I lived in Silicon Valley for the better part of 15 years. Involved with and been influenced by AI for quite some time now. I also have the wonderful privilege of working for Ray at IBM, and truly one of the greatest comms leaders that I've had the opportunity to work with. AI is no doubt at an inflection point right now, and all of the skepticism, all of the concerns are no doubt warranted. I think where we're at right now is we, the collective we, not just Salesforce, but especially tech companies, have a huge responsibility to not only develop and deploy these technologies in a safe and a transparent and an ethical way, but really to be stewards for the broader industry of how we can think about these technologies, how they can really impact our lives, and probably even most importantly, how they'll impact our day-to-day, our jobs, our families. So I am on the excited end of the AI spectrum, and excited to hear from everyone else today.
Hey guys, good afternoon. My name is Jason Bressler. I am the Chief Technology Officer of a company called United Wholesale Mortgage. We're out in Pontiac. We are the largest mortgage company in the country. For reference, I have roughly 1,500 team members that work for me in Pontiac. We build everything in-house. It kind of is our mantra for what we do. We kind of, and I'll say I did, and then everybody just kind of followed lead, took my hands and put them behind my back and dove head first into concrete with AI. So I am very pro overall AI for, excuse me, for what it can bring. Very big in the adaptability of any new technology, and obviously as long as ethically, and that really is, kind of what we'll end up discussing, but ethically how it's done, how you can do it, and then how we can move forward using the technology.
Hi, my name is Dr. Rosie Jahng. I am an associate professor here at Wayne State in the Department of Communication. I teach courses in public relations and media effects to both undergraduate and graduate students now. As to how AI touched my day-to-day, I guess, and I can speak in both as an educator as well as a researcher. As an educator, I'm kept on my toe because unfortunately for me, I spend too much time browsing on TikTok and Instagram Reel, doom scrolling, and unfortunately for my students, I've seen so many tricks on how AI can help them cheat. So I had to think a lot about the way that I teach the materials as well as assess the materials to my students, especially any type of written assignment. I've been very upfront about it. We played around with it in class. The ChatGPT started to be in the news coverage primarily right around the time I was teaching the Fundamental of New Media Communication course. And we use that as a living experience in terms of how we understand new media. As a researcher, as I was preparing for this, I realized that my first master's thesis was on how photojournalists use Photoshop, and there was a scare around that at the time. That unfortunately reveals a bit of my age here, but and ever since, I've been looking through the different ways in which media technology shapes the way that we understand the world. And this is a new and exciting opportunity for me as a researcher. Not because necessarily I'm pro AI, but because I want to look into things that we can use it transparently and with less bias. So, thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Madeline Beck, and I'm actually a student here at Wayne State. I'm the editor-in-chief of our school paper, The South End, and I'm also a journalist. I was a former intern at the Detroit Free Press. I'm sure if you're like me and you're addicted to TikTok, you've seen all of the very interesting things that AI can do. There's a very broad range of things from writing to technology to let's pretend this song was sung by a different person and then make a cover of it and put it on TikTok. So as far as my stance on AI, I think I have a very neutral stance overall. As a student, I think my professors, some of them are very against it, some of them are very pro-AI, and it can help us, and obviously some of them are concerned that we're going to use it to cheat. I think it has a lot of negatives, but also a lot of positives. So.
Hi everybody. I'm Rob Davidek. I'm the news director at WWJ News Radio 950. It's the all-news station here in town. And AI, we just received some guidance from our corporate office regarding all of our stations across the country about how we're going to implement it, use it, what we should be worried about, what we shouldn't be able, or how we should be able to use it, not to write stories necessarily, but to come up with ideas, headline writing, and things like that. So I'm one of those that, it could be good, it could be bad, right? And especially where we're at media-wise, you mentioned the voices and the changing of the voices, right? We have some presidential campaign coming up in the next year, and, are we going to get some of these fake voices coming on the air doing things like that? So those are just some of the things we're worried about. But on the other hand, I think, we all have to adjust to technology, and that's just one more thing we have to deal with every day. So looking forward to this discussion. Thanks for having me.
Hi, I'm David Welch, the Detroit Bureau Chief for Bloomberg. I was the Detroit Bureau Chief for Business Week before that, and did a turn in New York in the middle covering Wall Street banks. Personal experience with AI. At Bloomberg, we have something called Bloomberg Automation. And what it does is it scrubs our data and analyst reports to write an earnings forecast for some companies leading up to their quarterly earnings report. And it's a series of bullet points. It's not what I would strictly call journalism, but it is information, which is what we sell. And most reporters are like, look, this is utter crap. You know, because we always have to take it, fact check it, put some real paragraphs and put context into it, and actually get the analyst reports that these things scrub to actually get some language words out of those reports and put it in, because this is really a series of numbers. But think about that for a second. So Amazon started off selling us music, books, and now they sell everything. They didn't start off selling us everything. Technology companies, technologies always build from the basics to something much more advanced. So what does that mean for something like Bloomberg Automation, ChatGPT? It starts off giving you something that's very simple, in the words of some journalists, are crap. But eventually, it could write something. And you still need someone to edit it, read it, make sure it makes sense, make sure it's got the numbers right. But you still have reduced the number of people, the number of hours you need to produce that. And that brings rise to a lot of questions going forward. If this thing spits out something that's not great, the editor doesn't catch it, who's the PR person complaining to, Ray? There's no journalist to scream it on the phone. Kind of joking there, but still, you know, you're going to get something. This will happen. You will have some journalism being done, you know, whether it's just rewriting press releases or earnings via Bloomberg Automation, ChatGPT, whatever ends up being, and someone's going to try to use it on a big scale to make a lot of money because it's a lousy, low-margin business putting out things. And you'll have some serious questions about that going forward.
Let's look at a couple of facts. You talk to Americans today, only 1 in 4 admit they understand AI. Even more admit they fear it. But 1/3 of all businesses say they're using it regularly, and 40% are going to increase their investments. Maybe just two of you, and maybe start with Jason. Why has AI become the buzzword of 2023?
You know, I think it started obviously with ChatGPT. That blew up everybody's idea of what AI is and what it could be, and that generative conversational model kind of changed how we look at everything. I think that I probably don't buy the fact that, you know, 1/3 of businesses are using it right now. I think they are, and they like to hold on to that and that tagline for their marketing purposes and for recruiting, but it's not really happening. I think, you know, really right now we're in a place where people are just starting to explore what AI could actually do to process. That basically is what it is. And we're embracing it because, look, the economy's not great, and people are paying less, there's less jobs in the marketplace, and it's surprisingly, and you know, maybe some of you guys see this as well, it's still harder to hire even at some of the lower skilled jobs that people typically work their way up in. And so using AI is a great way to understand where there's deficiencies in the workflow and the automation and the operation, and then really being able to ethically figure out how can we reduce that and get more done with less as we move through the process.
Maybe just unpack that one more, and then I'm going to ask Rosie the same question. Define AI for the non-chief technical officer, for the world that doesn't get what this is. What are we talking about? What is this machine doing? And
so, you know, I look at it two ways. You know, when I explain it, I'd say, you know, there's really two different streams to look at that really tie into each other. One is generative AI, that's ChatGPT. Anything that you can converse with and query and talk to, it's just grabbing data. But, you know, probably, you know, what a lot of us don't know or didn't know is if you look at ChatGPT, it only kind of goes up to 2021. It has no new data from that. You can't look at anything new. It can't query or talk about anything new. And we take it almost as its word for whatever it says. It's ridiculous that we do that. But that's generative AI. Whatever data is queried and then presented back to the end user. And then there is, which really is the same thing, LLM. That's the large language modeling. And that really is predictive analytics. At the end of the day, just how fast can we get that out? And that really is the crux. Even when you look at images and deepfakes and anything you want to talk about with AI, it all boils back down to that and those two things. And you know, when you look at it, and this is absolutely true of any piece of technology that you could ever use, and you guys probably know this, so it's almost preaching to the choir, but Garbage in is garbage out. And so whatever you put into your modeling is what you're going to get back out of it. It's just how it's presented to you. And that really is what AI is. And then everything else spans off of existing platforms and technologies to enhance something. Well, that's RPA. It's, robotic process automation. And how can bots go through and move in the back end? That's not AI. That's just a different platform disguised under the umbrella of AI. And so that's why I think a lot of places actually say that they have it, but don't really understand what they're even saying.
And Rosie, from an academic standpoint, AI is technically not new. We've had the notion that machines could think since World War II. From an academic standpoint, can you give your view on what is AI as you explain it?
Okay, so this is kind of where I started my preparation to be on this panel. For me at least, I needed to have a set of characteristics that I can use to generate my own definition of what artificial intelligence is. And from my very limited and superficial understanding of computational research methods, some statistical learning, machine learning that I've been able to study, it is still a software. That's sort of the common sort of starting point for most of the articles and books that I've read. It is a software still. Named Jason. I'm kind of nervous up here, so it's like, okay, Jason. Jason mentioned a lot of the important elements that kind of overlapped with the way that I understood it. There's always going to be a training data. What we, a couple of years ago, looked at it through the word big data, if you guys remember that term. The big data serves as a training data that is used to develop a large language model. And from that model, what that model does, it will generate, it will either do two of the tasks that we think falls under the artificial intelligence. One, it needs to look a little human-like, as we see with the ChatGPT, right? As well as there has to be some element of automation. Those seems to be, so far, from the very crash course understanding of artificial intelligence that I tried to do in the last couple of months, those seems to be the common element of what we identify as a characteristic of artificial intelligence. Like Jason said, it is the generative AI right now. I think that's how a lot of people understand AI. And that's the generative AI is the one that triggered a lot of concern. I've read an USC Annenberg report that actually talks about how PR professionals specifically are extremely weary about their ability to use AI. And I think one of the reasons that is the case is because it generates a text as if it's human, as well as an automation to it. There's an automated human-like content that's being generated, and that is what is triggering a lot of fear in the context of public relations. So that's kind of how I look at it. I think I've touched on most of the things that Jason mentioned too.
Steve, your entire job as a PR professional, your title is AI PR, AI communications. And your company has gone all in, so you're naturally pro-AI. Is what you're doing PR spin, or do you truly believe in this? And Rosie cited the USC Annenberg data that said PR professionals fear it. You're a PR professional. Do you fear it?
I don't, but I think this is, the data, there's no doubt the data is telling. I think there's an issue in the PR industry. And part of that issue is that, I'm generalizing, but most people are like me. We are liberal arts-minded people. We're not technologists, so therefore we can only go so deep. We can go a lot deeper, but we often only go so deep in our real technological understanding and our appetite to use new technological tools to improve our job. Because although we might know it can be additive, although we might know it can help us differentiate our careers, it's tough. It takes time. It's already tough to do our jobs. We're under a lot of pressure. If you're on the agency side, you have a lot of clients. Now all of a sudden you've got to start using these tools, even if they're approved by your company. A lot of companies don't know if they should be approving these generative tools. And so now you're in this kind of individual contributor position of, do I take this step and try to start using generative technologies as part of my job? And when there's no top-down mandate to do so, and there's really no incentive to do so from the bottom up, you're kind of just content saying, I don't know if I trust it as much. But there's no doubt, and I'm not even talking about what Salesforce, my company, does. I'm talking about as a PR practitioner, there's this amazing opportunity, and so I've tried to light this internal fire of how do we use these tools, what are very tactical ways. We're not talking about boiling the ocean with AI, we're not talking about creating new code, we're talking about what are very specific, easy, tactical ways to make ourselves better, more valuable stakeholders for the people that we work and support. And the last thing I'll say, to the first question, which I think is a great question, in terms of like why now? There's a great lesson here, I think, for any communicator or aspiring communicator in the room, or any builder or any entrepreneur, and that's November 22 came out with ChatGPT, and it lit the world on fire in a good or a bad way, TBD, I think it's going to be net positive, because it was finally this technology, this world-changing technology that anybody could work with, no matter how your age, your technological acumen, it didn't matter. You could ask it a question. My mom was in town visiting one time, and I asked it to write me a song about my 5-year-old son, and it did, and I asked for the guitar chords, and it gave it to me. And it was magic, just like that. And then to Jason's point, there was this economic pressure to be more productive and more efficient. So now you've had your imagination sparked by getting your hands on this technology, starting to understand how it could start to kind of impact what you do, and then it was a very quick and easy way for the entire C-suite to start saying, okay, this technology can really be used in a fascinating way. Now we have to start taking the steps to deploy it in a way that really makes sense and is safe for our business.
Why don't we pass the mic down to David? And a lot of people's opinions are shaped by what I call the loudmouths in the industry. And when it comes to AI, no one is a bigger loudmouth or hater than Elon Musk. His quote last week was, AI is a civilization risk. Why is Elon a hater? And I have to think that he's probably using AI in some of his own products. You cover the auto industry, you cover this colorful figure. What's going on?
Yeah, we're talking about this. What was his quote before that? It was slightly less pejorative, but he said, AI risks making life meaningless. So, look, there are like multiple facets to Elon. He's a provocateur, obviously. He's a very impulsive guy, but there are things that he does that are also very, very well thought out, and part of his whole persona. And I think in this case, I think in a philosophical sense, he is worried about it. Part of that is he has cars that are supposed to drive themselves and they don't. He died them, and he's got a lot of trouble with the federal government over this at the moment. But he's not going to back off on that. So when he says this stuff, I don't think it's out of self-interest. And he pushed automation pretty hard in his own factories with, I think, a lot of trouble early on. I think they've got it working okay now in his plants. But I think he does see the opportunity and the perils of AI. And there's a lot out there. Look, self-driving cars right now, it's down to a handful of companies that can actually do this. And they're not all actually doing it. Tesla's kind of the one that's probably failing the most, but you know, we're seeing accidents, we're seeing vehicles run into emergency zones and crash with fire trucks. They're generally safer, but there are a lot of issues with that kind of AI. You know, BMW talked recently about how they were automating their robotics in their factories through AI, and they said, well, we cut only 6 workers, but we're going to put them somewhere else in the plant. Companies always say that. Well, we're going to find another job for them, and you know, it's not going to happen. Over time, all of this becomes a big risk. So, look, I thought his line about AI making life meaningless was really fascinating to me, because I think what he's talking about is a world where there's just less for people to do. And that's not just an income thing, although clearly it is. If a lot of jobs and things people do go away and are replaced by AI, robotics, then, you know, what do they do? And, you know, look, I have a degree in economics, and we study things from 60,000 feet in economics, and, oh, creative destruction, you know, these jobs are destroyed, but these are created. All's good. The problem is, this guy doesn't get that job. And so it's a big problem. And so his life becomes meaningless, and this guy's life is great. And we're always chasing the curve on it. Government is always chasing the curve on technology, as we see with social media and privacy. And capitalism is always ahead of the game making money on this, and somebody's ox is getting gored. So without Elon being here, I think that's kind of where he's headed. Somewhat philosophical, somewhat economic, and I think his own company is struggling. They struggle mightily with robotics in the plant, and with their own self-driving cars too. So
I'll go to Jason. You tell us, enlighten us on what's going on with Elon and his hatred for AI, and then I'm going to go to Rob to ask a different question. But what's in his head?
So, my feeling is if you're the owner of a publicly traded company and you've invested and touted in the future of automation and the future of artificial intelligence and it doesn't work out the way you want, you deflect. And that's exactly, to me, what it is. You throw your competitors off. You talk about the things that can and shouldn't and wouldn't work. I do understand the almost meaningless life if you buy into the fact that something, some entity is going to tell you what to do and what to eat and how to live and how to breathe and how to interact with other people. And to me, if I were in Elon's shoes and I feel relatively strongly that there's a leanness way towards his side, which is let me move everybody else over here so I can focus on the things that I said I was going to do and the things that I said I would be able to prove out. And if I say that AI is not necessarily the greatest thing in the world and we shouldn't put all of our energy into it, now I'm diving in head first this way to make sure that I can get what I want before my competitors can get there.
So he's doing the greatest PR spin. He's a PR spin master.
He's a genius.
Rob, let's change subjects. Regardless of your CBS corporate guidelines, does AI belong in the newsroom? David talked about how Bloomberg is using it. You, as a news director, who's in charge of a lot of people and a lot of development of reporters and journalists and their integrity, does AI belong in the newsroom, and what are the safeguards that you as a leader have to put in place?
So I think it does. I think we'd be foolish not to have it in our newsroom, to tell you the truth. I don't think it's going to write stories for us. Like I think Jason said earlier, right? It doesn't remember anything since 2021. So the presidential visit today, right? It won't have anything about that. How can it crank out a story when we tell it, hey, President Biden was talking with striking workers, write me a story, right? So that won't, I don't think we have to worry about that yet. Probably catch up sooner or later, and that we will have to. But again, I think for idea generation, I think that is the benefit of it. I don't think it belongs in the newsroom, writing stories, telling stories, right? The information. We've already known, some legal things came out where lawyers got in trouble because they had cases that they presented cases that weren't even cases, right? And so those types of things get us in trouble. But I think we have to, there's a use for it in our newsroom. What that use is, I don't know yet. Like I said earlier, headline writing, yeah. But we don't have to, okay, tell me the headline and I'm gonna write it verbatim, right? It takes, I think our producers will have to go through that. Hey, make that make sense, if that makes sense, if that makes sense. So I think in that way, I think we have to have it in our newsrooms. How much it will grow into the newsroom will be still yet to be answered. And then safeguards. To me, you have to trust your workers, right? If you can't trust your workers, why are they there? And so I think you have to trust them. That's through education, that's through, meetings, through, we have to go through this, and I haven't done it yet, but, our corporation is saying, oh, go and take this training. I don't know what's on the training yet, but they're getting to that point. So I think, yes, it does belong in newsrooms, and we just don't know how it's gonna, what the future holds.
Madeline, we're in a safe zone. I can be louder than Shelley and your other professors. So give the university a grade. How well are you as a journalism student and a pre-law student, so you can give grades to both departments? How well are you being prepared for this world of AI? How much do you talk about it? And what's your honest assessment from an education standpoint? And again, I'll keep you safe from Shelley.
Honestly, my experience with AI, I haven't learned a ton of it in some of my classes. All of my professors have opinions on it, but it's something that's so new that I don't even think they've had the time to really get a grasp on it and decide how they're going to teach it to us. So it's very kind of hands off. Like, we don't know what that does yet, so maybe let's not try to use it. Let's not try to use it for our papers. I have had some professors that they touch on the benefits as well as the negatives. As a student, most of my experience right now is in journalism, so I know that some of the things that AI does really well is it can get background information, which you need for sources. It can edit, it can transcribe. So when I go and I interview a source, that's a lot of work to transcribe everything that they said to me. And so running it through a machine, it just makes my life way easier. But I also know that as a student journalist, the things that AI can't do, it can't build human relationships. Your sources are like the most important thing, and building a relationship with those sources is also super important. For other people that are going to be reading that news, they need to know that you actually care. AI, there's no feelings there. There's no care put into the writing.
Got it. What grade would you give the university?
I think I would give them maybe like a B+. I think that's pretty fair. So.
Okay. So Kelly, Pradeep, we've got some opportunity ahead. I'm going to open up to anyone and just grab the microphone. The biggest issue on AI right now is jobs. What we constantly hear about is AI is going to take jobs. And when Steve and I were at IBM and we've been talking about AI for a long, long time, this was the question we got every day of the week. And what we used to say was, it's not really, will AI take job? It's the fact that AI will affect 100% of our jobs. But what's the reality? What's your view in terms of the employment pool? We have half this crowd of students who are looking to have a job in the next couple of years. And some of them are in journalism. Do they need to worry about AI replacing the entry level and the newcomer jobs? Jason, you want to start? You have a lot of people.
I'd be happy to. So, I think the answer is yes and no. I think it's a matter of which jobs and what they look like in the marketplace. I think from a journalistic standpoint, no. I would say absolutely not. If you look at technology, and if we use ChatGPT as an example, if you look at ChatGPT as an enhancement to an existing process, and that's really the way that I think AI needs to be looked at in general. It's just like, like Rosie said when Photoshop came out, and it was, oh my God, I can't believe that somebody could slightly alter this picture. Well, really, it just makes it look a little bit better, right? It's like, there's the South African tribe that thought, only 50 years ago that if somebody took their picture, it was taking their soul. It's not true, I think. And so, overall, it's how do you take it and how do you enhance it? Nobody can write your voice, right? Nobody can write, and it's not there yet. It will not be there quickly in that kind of way, and especially since all of its access to information comes up until 2021. And so, when you look at it from a journalistic standpoint, it's easier to get data. You do not, and I don't think anybody does, and we were talking about this earlier, is when new technology comes out, it always panders to the lowest common denominator. Typically, that's where you get a lot of fake news. Like, if you're not going to trust and verify where any of your information comes from, well, then what's the point? Those are people whose jobs typically would get eliminated. But, journalistic integrity literally begs you to say, what's my source? Do I trust it? In the same way, if it was another human being, you build a relationship to be able to trust the source that it's coming from, so that when you report on it or you write about it, you feel like you have integrity from the source as you're passing it along. It's the same thing with ChatGPT. If you use it properly and you source your information properly, instead of just relying on what you see on a screen and passing it right through.
We're all communicators, and we just build on your word trust.
Sure.
That's the issue of the month for PRSA, and it's the reason people fear AI. How do we, and maybe give the microphone to someone else to lead us off, how do we build trust? How do we deal with this trust issue with AI? What do we as communicators need to do?
I'll start because I wanted to build off of Jason's point on journalism and think about it from the PR perspective too. For so many years, PR as a profession, we tried so hard to demonstrate that we are a profession of integrity and ethics. And we have tried so hard to demonstrate that we can develop campaign strategies that are research-based and strategic, right? And that's how we have differentiated ourselves as a profession for many, many years. And if that's what we do, AI is not going to take away our job, right? If we look at PR as spamming on Twitter and email and flyers and just keep making the same thing over and over again and just throwing it out to people, which we have tried so hard to say we're not, then yeah, that PR is going to go away. So that's kind of one thing that I wanted to add on from the PR perspective, because I think there is also a similar scare for PR students that, is AI going to take away my job? And I say the same thing. In terms of building trust, I think a lot of the examples that we talked about in terms of it's always about getting called out. We don't like it when people sneak things in without our knowledge. That's a common, consistent results from the crisis communication literature. People don't like it when corporates or organizations do something shady and they get caught. And I think the same principle applies for AI. It's, for me, the ultimate thing about building trust, especially in terms of PR and use of AI, is the transparency. Be upfront about it. Be ethical about it. Everything that you guys study for the PRSA Code of Ethics, that still applies to how we use AI. And the reason why I think people get caught is because there's a social desirability aspect that, as a PR professional, as a liberal arts major, as a communication major, journalism major, I feel like I shouldn't be using it because it feels like cheating. And that's kind of the narrative that we need to fight against. And we have so many cases where AI in the context of communication and public relations were used so magically well, right? I'm thinking about that Mint Mobile ad a couple of years ago with Ryan, the Barbie guy. His last name is Gosling, yes. Oh, I should know his name. But that was beautiful, right? He just flat out said, AI, give me an ad that sounds like Ryan Gosling, with a joke, with a satire, and that was hilarious. That's a funny thing, but I think that sets an example of the transparency that's needed for building trust.
David, your view? Or Rob?
The only thing I was going to say is just learn more about it, right? How do you to trust is you have to learn. You had mentioned people who don't know probably don't trust it. Get as much information as you can.
David, your view? Bloomberg is built on trust.
Yeah, so look, what can AI do and what can't it do? What it can't do is it can't meet sources for a couple of bourbons at 8 o'clock at night. Get him to break confidentiality agreements so I can have it. It can't write opinion columns with great perspective like Tom Friedman can. What it could do, this is where everyone in this room ought to be paying attention to it, it could take a press release that maybe another AI software program wrote, and then it could rewrite that news story. Now, most news organizations wouldn't just let it spit it out. What you then do is you're going to take it, you're going to read the press release, and it's done the basics for you. So now you have to give it context and write it in. So you still have a human being who does that. So that person still has a job, but it does improve productivity quite a bit. If I had someone who could write all the B-matter paragraphs for me, and the basic numbers, say it's a company's earnings or a share buyback or something, and I put all those specifics in there, and I just had to double check and write the context around it, I could turn that story around in minutes instead, 5 minutes instead of 20. And that's productivity gains often result in job loss, and that was your original question. So that's something it could do. Does it get into some of the other stuff over time? Maybe. The thing that worries me is, we're using it just for very basic, it's not even for earnings reporting, it's for basically forecasting what all the analysts say is going to happen, right? It's consensus forecast of profitability. But if it did rewrite a press release on something like that, people in here who've done corporate PR know this. Companies can take costs and shift them from one quarter to the next quite legally. And they do it all the time to make this quarter look better or worse because they need to at that moment in
Haven't heard
time.
anything about that.
Bob Lutz once told me that at General Motors you could ship $1 billion in a quarter if you really had to. And that's a lot of money. So, you know, and look, good analysts, good journalists will sort of see how that happened. Like, okay, why is your SG&A cost like ridiculously low this quarter? Well, you shoved me a bunch of, you just didn't pay a bunch of bills this quarter, but October 1 you're going to be paying them, right? AI is not going to pick up on all that sort of thing, and that's what you need. You need the context. So, look, it can't totally replace journalists, but it can absolutely, and PR people who's writing all these releases for that matter, but it can increase productivity to the point where maybe you just don't need as many people, or you need a different kind of person doing the work. So I don't dismiss any of that. And when journalists tell me, oh, you can't do what we do, I'm not worried about it. Like, don't whistle by the graveyard on this. Keep an eye on it, and and get involved with it and learn how to use it.
Down to Steve, if we could. Steve, your company, among some others, signed a voluntary White House safety pledge regarding AI. But then several of the tech CEOs were called to Washington and they were asked, in Congress, does AI need to be regulated? And they all raised their hand. Do we need government regulation of AI? Or will AI be self-regulated and it'll all happen on its own?
That's a great question. I'm going to come back to that one. First, I want to talk about trust, because I think this is a great topic. I promise I have the regulation. Yes, it should be regulated.
This is called bridging, by the way.
Yeah, it's called bridging. It's not about the question they ask, about the answer you want to give. PR students take note of this. Also, hopefully PR students in the room don't think that the only thing that you're going to go into the career to do is press releases. It's something that's fading. It's hyper-tactical. It's going to be so much more than that. If you go into an internship and all you're doing is a press release, question the agency you're at. So that's one thing to itself. With trust, and I promise you this is the regulation piece, with trust, to me, it means honesty. And there have been a lot of good points on this panel, which is what AI cannot do, and that's build relationships. Now, to the point, it can help you get information about people you're going to be meeting with, and inherently that helps build relationships. But ultimately, especially in the comms industry, like, it's our job. Otherwise, people like David will call us out for being dishonest. The idea of a PR person who lies, there's no way to shoot your career in the foot faster than being dishonest about who you are, what you're doing, what your technology, or what your business is capable of doing. So when I think about trust at large, and we talk about transparency on this panel a lot, and I think we've been talking about transparency more through the lens of how the technology works, how AI will ration or get to a decision, if there's toxicity in the content, and it's having that ability to really understand the data and the outcomes. I also think there's transparency as a communicator, or as a leader, or as a government official, and there's a shift, and this is purely my opinion on this. I think for so long there was such reluctance to feel like you always had to have the right answer, and you had to know for certain. And you have these leaders of all generations that when they don't know something will just pontificate or fabricate or lie, instead of saying, you know what? We don't know. And there's a lot that we don't know right now. There's always a lot that we don't know, but especially in the field of AI. Like, this conversation is fascinating to me because so much of it is around generative AI. And this was a model that was announced to the public in November 2022. And it's lit the entire world on fire. It's amazingly inspiring. And I think one of the greatest things I've seen is, and OpenAI is a polarizing company as a result. OpenAI is the company that made ChatGPT. And their CEO, Sam Altman, when you listen to him, he's so genuine, he's so smart, but he will be the first one to say, we don't really know. I don't know. And that's not the end of the answer. Let's talk about a solution and how we're going to get there and how we're going to be benchmarked.
So regulate or not regulate?
So regulate. Regulation, so yes, Salesforce, along with other companies, have signed on for regulation. Regulation is a very good thing. The question is, what type of regulation, how to go about regulating? So even within the US, are we talking about at a federal or a state level? And how do you make sure that, whether it's the US, our allies, or adversaries, how do we make sure that we are not regulating out of our way, whatever our collective our might be? How do we make sure we're avoiding regulating our way out of a competitive advantage, if you want to look at the military route? And so it's a very, very complicated, it's far from binary answer of do we regulate and do we not? Instead, it's going to be looking at, even within the AI, and I'll wrap with this, even within AI, you can say, well, do we regulate AI? Well, what do we mean by AI? Are we talking about consumer AI, like when you order something on Amazon, it tells you here's what you should order next, or Netflix, or the little counting thing is counting down? That's AI working in the background, sort of regulating that in the same way that we're regulating enterprise AI that's already privatized data behind safe, trusted paywalls. So the good thing is that these conversations are happening. The bad thing is when we're feeling like there's got to be a rushed answer to say there's got to be ubiquitous AI regulation across the board.
Okay, we're going to open up to the audience in a few minutes, but I'm going to have everyone give a lightning round, which means short, everyone. Lightning round answer. There's about 100 people here today. They've all come to walk away with a new insight about how they should think about AI. What is your party message, your closing statement to these 100 communicators about why you are bullish or bearish on AI, and what is your greatest piece of advice? I'm going to start with David down here.
Look, there is a huge opportunity with AI to do a lot of great things here, but try to stay ahead of it in your mind and head off with externalities, unwanted, unintended consequences, and just really bad stuff that can come out of it. And don't get greedy with it, I guess is what we should be watching for, because job loss, not dishonesty, I guess. I don't know if AI could actually lie, but reputational damage, that sort of thing that can be done by just spitting out information without context. Opportunity here, but be very careful.
Rob, closing statement, greatest takeaway.
No, I think it's here to stay. Technology, we didn't have cell phones how many years ago, and look what they do for us now. So it's something that we have to live with and get to know as much as you can.
Madeline?
I would share a very similar sentiment to that. I think a lot of people are afraid of AI because they think, okay, look at the things that technology has done to jobs already. And especially for students, it can be really daunting because you wonder, okay, getting a job already seems hard, but what is AI going to do to that? But for me, I think that if we ignore AI, if we ignore new technology that's coming our way, that can't make it better. That can only make it worse, really. So I think the best thing to do in this situation is to embrace it, let it in. I mean, there are people that tried to say no. When the internet was invented, they were like, this is never going to take over. And now the internet is everything to us. We spend half our time on the internet, some of us. So I think that we should kind of look at AI with the same approach, but also tread with caution because, everything has its ups and its downs.
Rosie?
Learn about it. Don't be afraid to delve into the computer science and the statistical side of it too. There are really a lot of great courses that introduces it to you at a conceptual level. Know the limitations. Computer scientists are now starting to identify the biases that exist within the training data and how that impacts the language that's generated from some of the generative AI programs that we're using. So learn about it both from the computer science perspective as well as the social science caveats.
I would say two things. One, embrace the adaptability of what AI brings to your life. That's first and foremost best thing you can do because it's you, right? That is the number one thing that if I could impart anything, it's don't be afraid, but find ways that it can enhance who you are, what your job is, what your personality is, and how you can take that out in the world. And I think secondly, and since we're on a college campus, it probably feels right to say, fight the man, rage against the machine, trust no one. That really is the best thing that I can tell you. Question everything. Literally, I got two of my guys over here. I didn't know they were coming, so I'm sorry that I'm picking on them, but they never stop asking questions. They head up my AI. They do everything around it. They never shut up. They're constantly asking questions. That's exactly what you need to do. You need to constantly question, where is this source of information coming from? What does it really mean? And then when you have that wrapped around the adaptability of who you are and how you're using it, that's when the doors open.
Total extension of that. Get your hands on these tools. They're publicly available and they're so fun to play around with. Seek opposing views and then form your own opinion. Ultimately, everything is still unfolding in real time here. Your perspective is equally as valid as almost anyone else, so don't reach the headline, go deeper and form your own opinion. And then the last thing is just keep in mind, some of those biggest profitable, biggest employers in the world today are companies that were not around 30 years ago, let alone technologies that existed, and then jobs within those companies didn't exist 30 years ago. So there's a chance that we are on this precipice. of 30 years from now, when my kids are older, the biggest companies, most consequential companies in the world are just being created today, and that's incredibly exciting.
And the piece of advice from me is, those of you, whether you're students or you're on the comms professional side, be familiar with the diffusion of innovation curve and make sure you're not a laggard in your understanding of the adoption of technology. And I see a couple of my Ford colleagues in the back, and they will laugh because when I was in Europe, and a couple of us were in Europe, it was in the 90s, and we had a boss who was British, nothing against him being British, but we were talking about the internet and the fact that from a PR standpoint, we needed to get more digital. We needed to move from the analog world of putting out a gazillion news releases to being digital. And my boss at the time, this British gentleman, barked at me, and really, really barked, and he said, I don't want you to ever come in and ask me about that internet thing again. It is a passing American fad, and we're done. And that taught me, which is my second piece of advice to all of us as communicators, the biggest skill, the biggest competitive advantage we all can have is to be curious and to constantly reinvent ourselves. The half-life of a skill today is about 5 years. So it means whatever you've learned in your professional life, in your academic life, is going to be half obsolete in about 5 years. So to echo everything that's been said here, you don't have to buy into the pro or the con, but be curious. The curious communicators are the ones that will rule the world. So with that, why don't we open up the audience and ask tough questions of the panel, please. And we have 2 mics in the audience that are being passed around.
Could I stand?
And
What?
one mic.
You can, sure.
Here and one mic.
It's
I
on.
don't know if it's on. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Hi, everyone.